Good afternoon. My name is OCEPPFinalexamIlseNaomiJaimeTanamachi, and I am a student of English teaching at the Universidad Veracruzana. Today, I will talk about the universal design for learning as a strategy to promote inclusive education in the basic level classroom. So let's begin. Over the years, the issue of inclusion has gained strength in the education sector. Responding to diversity and the specific needs of each student through a system accessible to all without compromising the academic content has become one of the main goals of the new Mexican school. However, we face several challenges. Institutions call themselves inclusive just for accepting students with different disabilities or living conditions. Yet, children continue to experience barriers to learning and participation in elementary schools. So, inclusive education in Mexico has not been able to be fully exercised due to a series of factors, among which stand out the inaccessibility of the infrastructure, the lack of training of the teaching staff, and the stagnation in a standardized curriculum for the planning and evaluation of the students. Through a series of strategies, such as the Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, it is possible to generate an educational model that facilitates access to all the students, especially those who face barriers to learning and participation. Considering individualities, particular needs, and providing support and reasonable adjustments to the curriculum. So this presentation will be divided into three sections. In the first one, I will offer a concept of inclusive education based on several authors and institutions, such as the UNESCO or the Ministry of Public Education in Mexico, also called CEP. Then I will describe the factors that prevent its application in the classroom. And finally, I will suggest the use of the universal design for learning as a strategy that allows the teacher to respond to the range of educational needs that their students may have. So let's start. What is inclusive education? Education is a right that turns enable the individual to exercise others. Through inclusion, the education sector can promote the process to achieve a society open to diversity. According to the UNESCO, the inclusive education is a process involving transformation of schools and other learning centers to serve all children. It's crucial for achieving quality education for all learners and for the development of more inclusive societies. For its part, the CEP refers to this process as a creation of spaces that allow students to access, remain in, and graduate from the educational system, reducing inequalities and promoting learning and development of life skills. So the educational system then is the one that must seek to eliminate the barriers that prevent students from obtaining the expected learning, without this implying modifying their own individuality or without their particular needs being a factor that prevents it. Talking about inclusive education implies putting students who face some conditions at the center of learning, participation, and also in the center of the coexistence, taking into account that each child has different characteristics, interests, abilities, and learning needs, and must be the educational system the one that fits its students and not the other way around. So, according to several authors, it is a right for all the people with disabilities to have access to inclusive education, which implies making reasonable adjustments to activities so that students participate at all the levels of learning. Through these reasonable adjustments, it is possible to guarantee access to the educational curriculum. However, most Mexican schools do not apply these adjustments, and both the classes and the evaluations become standardized, homogeneous, and monotonous. So reality in schools tell us that the scope is minimal, and we continue to lack an inclusive practice in the classroom. Now, which are the factors that hinder inclusive education? The main obstacles we find within institutions can be divided into static factors and dynamic factors. The first refers to structural difficulties or the lack of resources in schools. For example, a boy in a wheelchair requires special facilities with wide doors, ramps, and spaces for his chair. A blind person, support of auditory and braille materials, and a student with cognitive disabilities needs human resources. These types of practical barriers are usually the most complicated because they require a physical adaptation to the infrastructure that is not always possible immediately, and also that depends on the economic resources of the institute. So they are quite difficult to adapt. But the second factors to do with have to do, with the attitude toward children with disability or living condition. Communication problems or the lack of information on the part of the teaching staff. Many teachers still resist housing students with disabilities and learning disabilities as well as those from minority cultures. This practice can lead to discrimination, which inhibits the educational process. And as impossible as it may seem, there are still people who segregate children who have a disability or face some living condition. So the lack of empathy, misinformation, and prejudice cause students to be rejected or, in the best cases, integrated but not included in the classroom. However, these factors are called dynamic precisely because can change with the information and the interest of those involved. The adjustment can be as simple as the modification of speech, the sensibilization, or the guidelines of coexistence in the classroom. Even to more complex, such as the adaptation to traditional teaching practices, adaptation of the methodology through strategies that encourage the active participation of all students. To achieve this change, the educational community must show openness to a change in attitude. Teachers who are not trained or who are not willing or have a little enthusiasm for working with students with disabilities or living conditions are an inconvenience for successful inclusion. So it is urgent to enable teachers from their professionalization so that they can attend to the process of inclusive education. Once the change in attitude has been achieved, it is possible to proceed with the modification of a study plan or the integration of strategies that consider different learning styles, adjustments in content and methodology to attend to the individual difference of students. According to the UNESCO, for inclusive education to take place in the classroom, it is necessary to adapt the activities and forms of evaluation according to the needs and singularities of our students. So, we therefore agree that it's necessary to exhaust all resources and generate imaginative solutions that are based on the principles of inclusion and equality. However, the teachers cannot do this alone. Teachers often face a rigid curriculum that not only does not respond to the needs or interests of children with disabilities or those who face some life conditions, but also to students in general. Therefore, it will be important to consider different strategies that may be accessible to these adaptations, such as the implementation of the UDL. So the UDL emerges as a teaching model that seeks to be easily accessible and develop a flexibility adapted to the strength and needs of the students. The principles of the UDL are aimed at ensuring that the student is motivated, autonomous, and achieve the expected learning through multiple forms of expression, perception, and action. For this, it proposed to carry out a non-simultaneous but linked activities that stimulate different learning styles and attend to particular needs. The first principle related to the knowledge network focus on the what of learning, that is the representation. It seeks to provide options for perception, understanding, language, and symbols. The second principle related to the strategy networks focus on the how of learning, that is the action and the expression. It seeks to provide options for physical action, communication, and the executive functions. While the third principle related to the affective networks focus on the why of learning, that is the motivation, and it seeks to provide options to capture interest, sustain effort, and achieve the self-regulation in the student. Which are the advantages of the UDL? One of the main advantages is that its flexibility is also beneficial for students who could be considered average, that is, without disabilities or living condition, since this planning is designed so that the content is accessible to all the students. The planning of the UDL aims to be versatile and dynamic, starting from the interest of the students, which requires an extra effort from the teachers, since in order to apply it and adjust the teaching, it is necessary to know the students. If the student does not manage to access certain skills, they can be omitted or compensated by others that serve their functionality. Likewise, it implies making a class-by-class design with clear and common objectives and goals, considering the ways of learning in a diverse way, without standardizing the evaluation test list, and also supervising at all the times the curricular adaptations to know if they are being useful or not. Thus, it is necessary that teachers be educated in this pedagogical process so that they know how to respond to diversity of the classroom, make the necessary adjustments to design a flexible plan, taking into account the various forms of perception, I mean the visual, auditory, practical, also the many ways of expression, oral, written, all through projects, and of course, the multiple forms of motivation through games, movement, videos, songs, all these in order to promote the continuous learning. So let's work together. The pillars of inclusion are respect and tolerance. By promoting inclusion, social cohesion is favored. A democratic society can only be achieved through education and inclusion with benefits to all the students involved, because a specific attention is paid to each student, have a disability or not. All the children learn differently and regardless of their personal characteristics, so they should have the same opportunities to learn. Inclusive education is committed to facilitate the access to all students to information, social environments, and adequate spaces where diversity is attended to. So, in conclusion, it is necessary to eliminate the VLP through an attitude change on the part of the educational community. Teachers have the responsibility of educating themselves on inclusion in order to develop more heterogeneous plans and assessments that respond to different learning styles and allow teaching to be adjusted. One of these strategies to be considered by teachers who are practicing or those who are still in training should be the use of UDL as a flexible didactic approach that considers the particularities of each student and lends itself to making significant adaptation that guarantee total accessibility to the academic content. So think about it and let's work together. Inclusion, it's possible. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.